Hi, everyone. For anonymity, I'll be using fake names for this post. My wife, Kara, 29 female, and I were married for 3 years, and we were two love peas in a pod. When Kara and I first met, I didn't think I would spend my life with another woman apart from her. I had this certainty about her, and from first sight, I knew she was the one for me. Also, the increase in my heartbeat confirmed that as I approached her to speak to her, the first time I saw Kara was at a distant friend's birthday, which I was dragged to attend by another friend. She was sitting with a group of friends, and they were all chatting loudly and drinking. It was a late night party, and there was so much to drink, but I didn't drink more than a glass because I wanted to be in the right state of mind for work the following day. The thing is, I used to be a timid person, and approaching ladies, gorgeous ladies like Kara, was a big deal for me. My friend, who dragged me to the party, noticed that I could not take my eyes off her since we arrived there, and without asking if I wanted to, he ordered the waiter to send her an expensive bottle of champagne and tell her it was from me. After it was delivered, I noticed that all her friends at her table turned in my direction, and they all smiled simultaneously. Then she smiled, raised her glass, and mouthed, "Thank you." Almost immediately, my friend pulled me from the chair I sat on and asked me to go and say hi to her. He knew I had been single for more than 4 years, and he wanted me to maximize my once-in-a-blue-moon pull of attraction, I felt. He knew I wouldn't like the idea, but he kept insisting, and after persuading and trying to convince me for nearly 15 minutes, I summoned the courage, walked to her table, and asked if we could talk privately. Her friends excused her, and we sat at a different table. We didn't say a lot that night because I was stunned by her beauty, and to be honest, it had been years since I talked to a woman about something that wasn't work-related. I worked as a programmer at a prominent tech firm in our city and considered anything other than work a waste of my time. We introduced ourselves to each other, and I found out she was currently doing her PhD, even without saying so much. I'm sure my constant blushes and ear-to-ear grin had given me out that night. When we delved into her work life, I discovered she worked part-time as a junior writer/editor at a publishing company, and I believed her because she sounded intelligent, and there was something about the way she spoke. After our little chit-chat that night, we exchanged contacts, and I left the party because I had to rest for a few hours before going to work the following morning. We had our first official date about a week later because I was caught in the web of deadlines, and she claimed she was busy too. Our first date was more fun than the night we met. We talked about so many things, and I loved that she was very free-spirited. She smiled and laughed wholeheartedly, and it was evident that she enjoyed our conversation and our time together. After our first date, we hung out more often and visited each other's apartments. Before we started dating, she would come over to my place on weekends, and we would try cooking a meal together from a cookbook, baking pastries with strange names, or we would just do something fun. As weeks passed, we got closer to each other, and I could not go to bed without thinking about her every night. I saw all the signs that convinced me she was the one for me, and I kept imagining what it would feel like to spend the rest of my life with Kara. As friends, I took her shopping and got her flowers and the things I knew she loved. I knew she loved me too, and I also knew she wanted me to ask her out. Her body language said it all, and eventually I did, and she said yes. For me, money was not a problem. I was well paid, and most importantly, I loved a spoiled Kara because it made me happy. We ended up dating for only 13 months, and we got married. We had a beachside wedding. Kara wanted that since childhood, and I was happy to do that. The wedding was small because we wanted to use part of the money for our vacation, and we did that. The first 2 years of our marriage were heaven on earth. Kara and I were much more in love with each other than when we were dating. Our bond grew stronger, and we literally did everything together. In fact, I only had breakfast, lunch, or dinner if I had it with Kara. We would eat together in the morning before she left for work. Lunch would be at a restaurant close to her office, and we always had dinner together when she returned home. Even when she had to spend extra time in the office, I always waited for her to come home so we could eat together. Aside from eating together, we had the rule of going to bed early so we could bond, get intimate, and talk about random things before sleeping off. Already in our first year of marriage, I had been promoted to a senior programmer in the firm I worked for, and my work became 100% remote unless I chose to go to the office. Kara was also done with her PhD and now working full-time as a writer/editor in her publishing company, which also came with an increased workload. Unfortunately, a year after Kara started working as a full-time editor for the publishing company, she got laid off. The company was cutting down on staff, and Kara also had to go. This was in the third year of our marriage, which changed many things between us. Being sacked took its mental toll on her, and she slowly became depressed. We no longer talked like we used to, or did our usual weekend cooking tradition. She became a shadow of herself, and it hurt me to see her that way. I even offered to double what she was paid at the publishing company, hoping it would brighten up her mood or cheer her up, but it didn't. She told me she wasn't working there because of the money, but because it was always her dream to work as an editor in that particular organization. Despite shuffling our house and her parents' house, Kara was still not herself, and I was becoming more concerned. It wasn't until a friend of mine recommended that she talk to a therapist, and that was when we began to see changes. Slowly, she became more active and the vibrant, cheerful woman I used to know. She met with her therapist 3 times a week, and I even insisted that she made it 4 times a week because I was impressed with the results I saw. I wanted her to be fully back to how she used to be, so bad that I didn't notice something else happening between her and the therapist. I was cleaning the house to surprise her the day I found out. She had gone to her parents' house the previous day, and I didn't want her to come home and clean. I even went grocery shopping to make her favorite meal and got scented candles to make her dinner special. I cooked first so I could clean up at once. I was in our room cleaning and folding clothes in the wardrobe when my hands touched a small journal that was partly tucked under a pile of clothes. I pulled the journal and realized it was from her therapist because it had the company's insignia on it. I know I should not have read it, but I was curious about what she had been journaling. To my greatest surprise, I found out Kara and her therapist were having an affair, and she journaled every bit of it. I was speechless and heartbroken. I went through the journal again to be sure of what I had read, and the content didn't change. Kara was cheating on me, and she was unapologetic about it. She even wrote about how her therapist was better in bed than me. I've got to admit, I was hurt and cried like a baby that day, and everything I planned for us was ruined. I laid on our bed for hours, and when it dawned on me that what had been done, I wanted them to pay for hurting me. I took pictures of the journal and filed a complaint to the therapist's office. I even took the journal with me in case they had doubts, and they were disappointed when they read it. When Kara came home that day, I told her I dropped by the therapist's office, and she was surprised. When she asked why I did, I dropped the journal on the table, and she began to cry. Immediately, she started begging me, but there was no way I would listen. Reading her journal broke my heart, and I could not forget all I had read. I kicked her out of the house and threw her stuff on the porch. She was so embarrassed and could not move, so I called her parents and asked them to come and get her off my property. In addition, I mailed the photocopy pages of the journal to Kara's grandmother, who was very fond of me, and she was taken out of her grandmother's will. Her parents begged me to not tell her grandmother, but that was my ultimate revenge plan. Ultimately, we got divorced, and her therapist had his license revoked. It was good that we didn't have kids yet, so it was easier for me to move on with my life. Kara became depressed and more miserable after we divorced, and I am glad she had to live with her parents' disappointment and shame. She called the house several times to beg me to take her back, but I wanted nothing to do with her. The last time Kara came, she met another woman and attacked her. I was so mad that I called the cops on her, and after that, I filed for a restraining order, and that was the last time I saw her. As for the woman she saw, we broke up because I was still hurting, and I have not completely moved on, but I'm glad I'm making progress. Opie, you handled the situation maturely and gave her a taste of her own medicine. Despite being a good husband and trying to support your wife, she still chose to cheat on you with her therapist. I know the things you read in a journal must have broken your heart, but you should understand that humans are full of disappointment, no matter how close we are to them. It's sad things ended that way, but you should be glad it did. She probably hates you for ruining her life and taking her out of the grandmother's will, but revenge is best served cold. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now, let's move on to the second story of the day. The first time my wife and I met was at a small restaurant near my workplace. That day, I went to have lunch with one of my colleagues, and I could not ignore her sitting alone. I was used to approaching girls and sweeping them off their feet with my sweet lines, and I thought I would get lucky with my wife. But she completed the line I wanted to use on her before I did. I was impressed to see that, but it also meant she would be a tough nut to crack. And like I had predicted, she was. Instead of blushing and smiling like other women, she locked her eyes with mine, faked a smile, and continued eating her food. That was my first time being ignored like that by a woman, and it was embarrassing because everyone's eye was on us. Still, overall, I found her attitude very charming and different from the rest of the women I had met. I kept talking to her without getting a response, and finally, after I tried so much, she smiled. When she smiled genuinely that time, I knew I had broken through her high walls, and with a snap of a finger, we were talking and laughing together. The conversation we had felt like we had known each other for a long time flowed freely and naturally. Despite being complete strangers, we chatted like best friends who had not seen each other in a while, and at the end of my 30-minute break, we exchanged contacts and Facebook handles. There was something I was looking out for, and when I saw that, I asked her out. I was convinced we were a perfect fit, and I didn't want to make the same mistake I made with my ex-girlfriends. Of course, she said yes, and we became inseparable. We even wore matching outfits occasionally because she thought it was sweet. We dated for 9 months before we married, and though my friends thought I was moving too fast, I didn't think there was a better time to officially make her mine. About 2 weeks before our wedding, I leased a bigger apartment, and we moved in when we returned from our honeymoon. The first year of our marriage was splendid. I had never been deeply in love like I was with my wife, so I did anything I could to make her smile every day. Before we got married, I noticed that my wife was fond of my stepbrother, and she often talked about him when we returned from our family hangout. My stepbrother was a gym instructor, and as a result of that, he was heavily built. He was also handsome, and the kind of guy ladies love to be around. In the past, I had female friends who abandoned me the moment they met my stepbrother, and this mostly had to do with his looks. Since my wife had 3 older brothers and was used to being around guys, I believed she also saw him as her brother. I never suspected that her talking about his looks and how well built he looked was her subtly telling me that she was into him. I was even glad that she had a way of always bringing him into her conversations, as well as her brothers. This was because I wanted our families to be one big happy family, and I didn't want her shutting out my family members, including my stepbrother. I had been with him since I was 13 and he was 17, and I didn't want anyone to come between the bond we shared. On my 28th birthday, my wife decided to throw a surprise birthday party for me at home, and she tricked me into coming home early from work that day. I had to take the family emergency excuse to leave work early, only to go home to a packed house. My parents, stepbrother, and some of my friends were there, and my wife's parents and her older brother were there too. The surprise worked, and I was so happy to see everyone at my house that it was a small party with a lot to eat and drink. By this time, our marriage was already 1 year old, and we didn't have any children yet. After eating and drinking, everyone decided to hang around, since they were mostly family members and close friends. Also, it was pouring heavily outside, and no one had the excuse of going to work the next day since it was a Saturday. Everyone in the room was an adult, and in no time, we were arguing about politics and our economic crisis. The conversation grew intense as we all tried to outtalk one another, and that was when I noticed my wife was not with us. I didn't even notice when she left because she was sitting behind me, so I asked around for her. Everyone said they had not seen her until her mom casually said she had seen her walk down the corridor with my stepbrother. At first, I didn't want to go and look for them, but after some minutes, and I didn't see them or hear their voices, I excused myself. Walking down the corridor, I paid attention in case I heard voices, but I didn't hear a sound. When I didn't hear a sound, I felt something was wrong, but I couldn't tell what it was. As I approached our room, I began to hear soft, muffled moans, and my heart nearly dropped in my stomach. I walked closer to our room, pressed my ear against the door, and could not believe what I heard. I was devastated and heartbroken, but I had to keep myself together. A part of me wanted to go in there and give them the beatings of their lives, but I knew it would only complicate things. So, I slowly pushed the door open, and luckily, they didn't hear a creak because they were so busy. I turned on my phone video recorder, recorded them, and quietly returned to the living room. About 15 minutes later, my stepbrother returned first, and some minutes later, she came in. She changed her clothes and took her bath, so no one would suspect anything. When we were complete, I asked if everyone wanted to see a movie, and they all agreed. Then I told my wife to go and make popcorn for everyone. While she was making the popcorn, I transferred the video I had recorded to my flash drive, so I could plug it into my large screen television. We were settled as soon as the popcorn was shared with everyone. I played the video, and though they did not understand at first, their mouths eventually fell when they watched the video. My wife and stepbrother were the most surprised ones, and they could not say anything or defend themselves. They sat there speechless. Our parents were shocked and disappointed, and none of them could say anything. They were all ashamed and expected me to react in a certain way, but I didn't. Immediately after the video ended, I asked my wife and stepbrother if they liked the movie, but they couldn't maintain eye contact. Funnily enough, it stopped pouring at the same time, but no one made an attempt to leave. When my wife could not bear the silence anymore, she started crying and begging. Her mom was so angry that she yelled at her, but she didn't stop. I went into our room and packed her things so she could leave with her parents, and eventually she did. No one dared beg on her behalf, not even her parents. My stepbrother left before my parents, but what he had done caused a rift between us. Everyone left that day with their heads buried in shame, especially my wife, and there's no need to ask if I divorced her because I did. It was even worse because I never spoke to her again. I didn't only cut ties with her, I did with my stepbrother too, and things never remained the same in my family. It's been 2 years now, and I'm finally able to tell this story because I have been able to let go. Though it hurt a lot, and I still don't think she deserved forgiveness, I had to do it for myself. I met another woman, and we're taking things one step at a time. Opie, why would you keep hurting for a woman who cheated on you with your stepbrother, not minding that the whole family was in your house? That's pure evil and disrespect. Both of them were toxic, and you did the right thing by cutting ties with them. That was the height of betrayal, and none of them deserves to be in your life. I do not think she would have only cheated on you with your stepbrother. Maybe she would have done the same with other attractive men. So consider this good riddance of taking out the trash. I hope you are able to heal from this. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I, 33 male, have been married to my wife, 30 female, for 7 years. It felt like my wife and I were working to get our life together for a long time. Eventually, we bought a house because I finally saved enough money. She was making money too, but it was barely above minimum wage. My job required that I travel a lot, and at the most I would be gone for 1 week at a time. We made it work by video calling and texting a lot. However, it became clear that my time away bothered her. She would go out with friends often and started doing that even when I was home. This was devastating to me because I thought if she loved me, she would spend as much time with me as possible. One night, we were both home, and she was absorbed in her phone. I finally had enough and asked her what was going on. She became defensive immediately and said that she didn't feel close to me anymore because I wasn't home often enough. I reminded her that she suggested I get this job so we could afford nice things in life. She said she really enjoyed the relationships she had with her friends and needed that time to relieve stress. I asked her if I could meet her friends, and she said no, that it would be awkward for her to combine her home life with her work life. I was deeply hurt and could tell I wasn't going to persuade her, so I dropped it for the time being. Soon I was told to go on another business trip. I told my wife it would be longer than it really was. When I came home, I could see a shirtless man through the front window of my house. I swear it was like my heart stopped beating. I assumed it was one of her coworkers, but when I got closer, it turned out to be our married neighbor from down the street. Out of all the people my wife could be cheating on me with, it was someone I knew. He came to our house with his wife a month ago for a barbecue, and for all I knew, that's when their affair started. I watched through the window easily, getting a clear view of them kissing and touching like they were a couple. I walked back to my car and called the guy's wife. These were neighbors we exchanged numbers with and asked to watch our house when we went away. She answered, and I asked her if she knew where her husband was. She was very confused and said he was working late. I played it cool and just told her there was a package accidentally delivered to our house. She arrived minutes later to get the fictional package. I watched from my car as my wife opened the door in her robe. They talked for a moment, confused, until the woman's husband came into view behind my wife. The woman started screaming and asking a lot of questions, trying to enter the house. As the scene escalated, I called my wife's parents. I told them it was nice knowing them and their daughter, but I was going to leave her because she cheated on me. They were shocked and started asking questions. I told them if they wanted to know what was going on, they could come to our house now for a surprise on what was happening. I wanted them to witness their daughter's affair in case she tried to spin the narrative. While they drove over, I walked straight into my house. My wife tried talking to me through yelling and sobs as she was being attacked by the other woman, and her husband tried holding her back. It was a huge mess and drama that I was not about to get caught up in. I went straight to the traveling bag that I kept packed in case of a short no-miss trip. I walked back out of the house and told my wife she needed to leave with her parents when they arrived. This confused and panicked her. She clarified that her parents were coming, and I simply nodded as I put my bag in my car. I sat in my locked car until her parents arrived and our neighbors refused to leave. The cheating man was trying to convince his wife to leave it alone, but she was not having it. She got in several slaps when my wife let down her guard and slapped her husband whenever possible. Obviously, all the questions in the world wouldn't make sense of unexpected infidelity. Nothing could soothe this betrayal. When my wife's parents arrived, I left. I don't know how they sorted out everything, but when I returned to my house one day later, the door was unlocked and a few things of mine were missing. After I filed for divorce, the calls, messages, and texts from my wife majorly increased. She was appalled by my sudden actions and wanted a chance to talk about what happened. I didn't care. I wanted a wife that wouldn't cheat on me, and I wasn't going to get that from her. She lived with her disappointed parents, and at the divorce hearing, she looked ragged and tired. She didn't work the same job anymore and certainly didn't look happy. I found a ton of support from my friends and family, while everyone turned against her because of her irresponsibility and selfishness. I started dating again, but I'm mostly just relieved to be free from my ex and have my house back. Wow, Opie, I'm so proud of you for keeping your cool as all of this went down. You managed to inform everyone necessary of what was going on so that you could emerge from this unscathed. Of course, this excludes the emotional turmoil involved in this betrayal, but I have faith in your ability to stay focused on your life's goals. It was so great you were able to call the guy's wife and have her come do the brunt of the work for you. Your wife deserved all of the stress and slaps she endured. You were right to end the marriage, and I'm sure you'll find a woman much better than your ex-wife. I wish you the best of luck with overcoming this situation. Now for today's second story. We started dating in September 2018 on my birthday, so that day has always been extra special to me. My partner does roster work. She works 8 days on a mine site and is backed 6 days off. I work a decent 9 to 5 job, so we are both pretty well off. She's also an international resident, so I decided to help her get her visa to stay. We applied for the de facto spouse visa at the end of 2020. For the first 3.5 years, our relationship was really good. We both loved each other and were doing so much together. Unfortunately, some clashes between her and my mom led to us moving out and renting a place for 6 months. She knew how to do everything. She's extremely independent, so she knew how to take care of a house and cooked really good food. I, on the other hand, was a bit of a dropkick and didn't know how to do any of that properly. My mom looked after me a bit too much, which handicapped me a lot when I moved out. Whilst I was working every day and being very smart with our money, we never had any money problems. I was also a bit selfish as a 23-year-old who tended to spend a bit too much time at the computer and away from household chores. I did make sure I spent some time with her though. We watched some good shows like Game of Thrones, Money Heist, and Merlin. I did, however, clean enough to ensure we got 100% of our bond money back. I did all the de-weeding by hand. After our 6-month lease was finally up, we bought a place together. This was around September 2021. She started her mining job around December 2021. And I, still being a dropkick, didn't do much of the housework. Although I did learn to cook some dishes as I needed to make sure I kept myself fed whilst she was on site. But I still didn't do the laundry or vacuum and mop the floor because my standard of cleanliness was so much different from hers. Instead, I spent my time learning how to invest because she told me she wanted to make a lot of money. I designed an investment plan just to suit her. I enjoyed investing a lot, cleaning not so much. In April of 2022, and she broke down in our bedroom at my lack of help around the house. She told me she was incredibly stressed with having to come back and do all the housework after 8 long days on the mine site. At that stage, I finally woke up and became the adult I should have become long ago. I started vacuuming and mopping the whole house once a fortnight and doing the laundry every week, making sure she had an empty basket to work with when she came back. It was like a switch was flicked on in my head. I should also mention that sex was non-existent in the last year of our relationship. She didn't want to take the pill due to side effects, although she was on it periodically for the first 3 years, and we had sex then. I went to buy a pack of condoms, but then she went and hid the condoms when we were about to have sex. So I just refused to have sex with her because I didn't want to have unprotected sex and risk pregnancy. She even suggested that I take the male version of the pill that would make my sperm infertile or something. I don't even know what she was on about there. I kept up my routine, making my own lunches and maintaining the house while she was away. I finally became an adult that could survive on my own, but the relationship didn't seem to improve. Slowly over time, she stopped cooking for me and didn't like me touching her in bed. She also gave me her cheek for kisses instead of her lips. Looking back, these were all red flags, but I was blinded by love and my desperation to save the relationship. I kept up with the cleaning and maintenance. She even went back on the pill to balance her hormones, or so she claimed. I tried initiating sex with her again at that point, but she refused. And then came September 17th, 2022. I was mopping the floor in my computer room and couldn't use it because the floor was wet. I went to use her laptop instead and saw everything in Messenger. She had been in a casual but intimate relationship with a man on the Mine site a little younger than me. The text messages were extremely explicit. I saw they had this going on since late July. I couldn't go any further back because I was about to throw up. I confronted her about it that night, and she told me she had been extremely stressed with work and had fallen out of love. I didn't understand. She loved me when I was a total tropic. Then all of a sudden, I became this mature and capable adult, but she didn't love me anymore. I was a total wreck for the next week and couldn't sleep well. I decided to call things off with her. I cannot be with someone who commits infidelity. We're going to split up our assets and go our separate ways. She told me she wants to remain friends, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, nor do I think that's a good idea for either of us. This also has implications for her visa. She is currently on her temporary visa until the end of November this year, at which point we were supposed to sign off on some documents so she could get her permanent residency. I told her I refused to sign any documentation as I basically would have to lie, which could get me sent to jail along with a big fine. She may still be able to get her permanent residency if the department decides to award it to her, but she is at a much greater risk of having to go back to a student visa, which means she will lose her mining job. Along with her life savings of having to enroll in some course, she doesn't want to complete and pay international student fees, which are bloody expensive, along with wasting years of her life just to progress her spouse visa, all for nothing. Opie, this was an exit affair. By the time she began crying to you about your lack of effort, she had already checked out. She unfortunately chose the most immature way to do it. At least you can use this as your own learning experience and personal growth. You didn't deserve to be cheated on. She could have been honest at any time. It would be best if you get to no contact as quickly as possible. Don't kick yourself too much. You were 20 years old when you entered into this relationship. You showed a great deal of maturity when you changed your behavior to help your partner and the relationship. Regardless, you have dodged a bullet and you will be better off without her. A young man who is capable of living on his own and who can cook and clean is a huge plus in the dating field. Enjoy being single. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. I first met my wife when I was at the park. I was jogging, and she was having a picnic with her best friend. While I was jogging, they both waved at me, and I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. It had been 2 years since I even tried dating someone. I approached them, and the rest was history. She was mild-mannered, but well-socialized. Her parents raised her to be a proper lady. I was just her third ever relationship at the age of 26. Before I knew it, we were together for 3 years, and I was proposing. Our 13 years of marriage were amazing, picture perfect. We met so many friends along the way and made a lot of great memories that still have an effect on me. On more than one occasion, a friend of ours asked us how we made our marriage so great. I wish I knew what kept it going and why it had to end. From my perspective, everything was great between us, minus one or two strange things. One of these was that my wife was frequently invited on shopping sprees with one particular friend she called Helen. I never met her. My wife only had about $40 to spend each week, but she never complained. Then, my wife got a brand new car. She said it was left to her, in her father's will. She just wasn't able to pick it up for a while. I never saw any proof of what she said, but she was so happy and seemingly innocent, I didn't feel like I needed to ask more about it. I trusted her, but that soon changed. I was good friends with all the people at my job. They would show me things they found on the internet that they got a kick out of. I had a smartphone, but I didn't have accounts all over everything like they did. One day, my buddy casually walked over to me to show me some TikTok videos. After it played, he scrolled down, and I saw a very attractive woman. After 2 seconds, her face came into frame, and I saw that it was my wife. In our house, she was barely wearing any clothes and she was dancing. I was shocked. I asked my friend how the heck he had my wife on his phone, but he said she was just really popular. She had lots of followers. He showed me, and I saw she had 237,000 followers. I didn't even know my wife had a TikTok account. I pictured her doing yoga and smiling at me. Here she was displaying herself for all to see, and if she was doing this, what else was she doing? I raced home after that. My mind was swimming about Helen, the shopping sprees, the car, all the time she had alone to do what she wanted. No wonder why she never wanted to get a job. She was too busy flirting, and I might as well say, cheating with other men. When I confronted my wife about it, she started saying sorry over and over again, finding herself unable to voice any reason for what I just saw. I was speechless, but I'm sure my face asked her what I wanted to know. She tried to get close to me and cry, but I wasn't in the mood to comfort her. I closed myself in the bathroom, and with her up against the door in desperation, I screamed to ask her what I just saw. She said she started doing it believing it wouldn't hurt us, and she could have some fun. Even though other men watched her, she swore she'd never do any cheating for real. I was disgusted and felt like this definitely fell into the category of cheating. I asked her if men ever gave her money, and she hesitated before saying they did. I asked her who Helen was, and she was silently sobbing. She squeaked a few times before she explained who this person was to her. Helen was a fake name for her sugar daddy. She didn't call him that, but that's what she described. She was paid to be his emotional partner and go on dates or shopping sprees. This was not the wife I knew. I opened the bathroom door and asked if she ever slept with AP. She looked me straight in the eye and said no, but her mouth moved in the way it did whenever she lied. I asked for her phone and she refused, so I kicked her out. She didn't know how to make this right, and there was no way she could have. There was nothing that would have made me let her stay in my house ever again. I had to stand up for myself the way I would have stood up for my wife if she was worth it. Before the divorce was even final, my wife was arrested. She was caught selling something of hers that shouldn't have been for sale. She got so used to doing this behind my back, it must have been a relief to do it as a single woman. When her family found out what she was really like, they couldn't believe it. For a while they wanted to blame me for her behavior, but it became clear I wasn't the one to drive her away. Her parents actually took her back into their home, only for her to bring men over and wake them up at night. They didn't tolerate that more than twice, and she was back to surviving alone. She did tell me she felt terribly miserable for destroying our relationship and all the other relationships she had. I told her I would never forgive her for ruining the relationship I saw as perfect. I still find it hard to believe she completely changed like this. She needs redemption, and I wish her the best of luck, but I'm not holding my breath. I've since started dating properly again, maintaining my independence and my refusal to stoop below moral standards. It's hard knowing that I loved this woman for so long and she still made the decision to hide something from me. What keeps me going is the hope that I'll find a woman who tells me what she's thinking about. If she feels like she needs more friends or attention, if the bedroom activities need a change, whatever it is. I know that's the only way to avoid something like this from happening, and I'll be an observant spouse that verbally reaches out to connect with my mate. If she can't talk to me honestly about how she feels, there's no way I'd get the chance to improve it. Just because she feels this way doesn't mean I deserve to lose my spouse, and it doesn't mean she deserves another lover. OP, communication, compromise, and compassion have the power to restore and maintain any partnership. The problem is people aren't perfect, and they don't always want or feel able to communicate what they don't like about the relationship anymore. All they know is they don't feel like handling a drastic life change or putting up with the hassle of heartbreak. Finding a way to cheat is easy in today's world, but it still isn't right. She quickly let her secret habit take over and run her life as soon as she left. If she was truly remorseful, I don't think she would have behaved like that, which goes to show you did the right thing. Whenever a spouse cheats on their mate, the best option is to start over again. The first and hardest step to this is cleaning up the remains of what was. Making a plan or figuring out how to proceed without the one you loved is difficult, but not impossible, and it's the only way to move forward in life. Anyways, let's now get into our second story for today. I worked on a crabbing boat for 30 years. For 7 of those years, I was married to my wife. Our relationship was pretty good, but whenever I had to leave for a fishing trip, she hated it. I could be gone for up to 5 months, but that didn't happen too often. There was also a risk factor, so she worried about me. Cell reception wasn't too great out at sea, so we invested in walkie-talkies that could communicate up to 1,000 miles apart. I was usually busy doing something, so we didn't talk all day every day, but at least once a day. My wife suddenly went from dreading my departure and trying to get me to retire to encouraging me to leave. She said she found 2 new hobbies, which were gardening and raising chickens. Still, I secretly asked my brother to keep an eye on her because I believed she could be cheating on me. He was more than willing to keep me updated. I gave him a walkie-talkie as well and told him a channel other than the one I spoke to my wife on. A month into my journey, he told me he knew for sure she was cheating on me. I broke down. I didn't think it would hurt as bad as it did when I knew for sure. I tried asking him questions to figure out who he was. I asked what he looked like, where he lived, where he worked, anything he could find out. He actually asked why I wanted to know. I said revenge and certainty. He said he wasn't sure it was such a good idea for me to seek this guy out. He suggested I just let it go and divorce my wife. I asked him why he thought that was the best thing to do, and he said finding the truth might hurt me more than just accepting what happened. It was much harder to work after this conversation. I didn't know it was a fake name, but I knew it wasn't someone I knew. I thought it was wrong that he didn't want to help me find out as much about this guy as possible. I kept radioing my brother over the next few days, even more than I did my wife. I didn't want her to know I knew, until I got home to confront her and officially break up. I didn't need her covering her tracks, causing me to second-guess the truth. One day I decided to give him a call, even though it was after midnight, but he answered me. Before our conversation got very far, I heard my wife's voice in the background while he spoke to me. My jaw dropped. There was no mistaking her voice. My brother was with her right now and openly talking to me in front of her. I asked why he was with her, and it took way too long for him to reply. She tried to radio me to pretend she wasn't with my brother at the moment. I said if she wasn't cheating on me with him, then who is she cheating with? Because I knew it was someone. She finally admitted that yes, she was cheating with my brother, and I heard him scolding her for telling me. She went on to tell me that he wanted to be with her and planned on lying to me so that I wouldn't hate him, but would still divorce her. I switched to my brother's channel and started talking to him. He said she was lying and there really was another man. He was only with her now because he confronted her as AP left. I told him I never wanted her to know that I knew, so she'd be unprepared for me to leave her. He apologized for telling her, but swore she was lying when she said he was her lover. Needless to say, it was hard for me. I wanted to sign with my brother, but I knew he was AP. When I finally got home, I filed for divorce and tried to find any record of the fake name he gave me to no avail. My wife tried convincing me my brother was AP, but I refused to credit her words at all. She didn't want me to divorce her, even though she was cheating. I told her no matter who AP was, she didn't deserve to have a man care for her if she was going to betray him whenever he wasn't around to babysit her. One day, my brother finally came clean and told me what happened. He claimed that she was the one who came on to him and that he couldn't resist. At that moment, I told him to never speak to me again. I then informed all of my family members on what happened, and he's no longer allowed to be near them anymore. My ex was devastated that my brother was suddenly gone and didn't know how to handle her lonely, recently divorced self. She knew what happened to him because I told her. It only took 3 weeks for her to start sleeping with whoever she wanted, while dealing with my brother deciding not to be with her anymore. To top it all off, my ex fell pregnant by one of the men she slept with. He was married, and when the truth came out, it didn't stay quiet. The whole town and all the people my wife knew started trash-talking her. She went from me to my brother to another married man all within a year. She deserved the unexpected pregnancy and rejection. Opie, I can only imagine how hard it must have been to stay strong, but you came out of this a role model to others who experience such pain. Even family can turn on us for their own benefit, and when it happens, the best thing to do is focus on loving yourself. You are all you have at the end of the day, so stay strong and pay attention to what you need. Surround yourself with other people you trust, and don't lose your faith in them too. Trust is earned individually, and just because some people take advantage of it doesn't mean others will. I wish you the best of luck in life, and thank you for sharing your story. I have faith you'll remain patient and vigilant until you find a partner worthy of your love and dedication. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark. I hope you all are having a wonderful day or evening. In today's story, Opie found out his wife cheated on him with a guy she met at a bar and now claims that she wants to have kids with him. Now, let's get into today's story to find out what happened. I, 37 male, have been in a relationship with my wife, 35, for 15 years and married for 5. We have 2 children, ages 3 and 1. On December 13th of last year, she met the AP at a bar about 2 blocks from our apartment. She had been in a state of depression for a while preceding this and was self-medicating with heavy alcohol abuse. She had gone to the bar for a drink and met the AP. They struck up a conversation. He listened to her troubles and they exchanged phone numbers. He gave her some weed. She was too drunk and slash or high to drive the 2 blocks back to our apartment, so she called me. I had been calling her fairly frantically all evening as she had failed to pick up the kids from daycare and had effectively vanished. She was so far gone on the phone that she had to ask the AP standing next to her, as she called me, where she was so I could come and pick her up. When she finally sobered up, she simply said that the AP had been a friendly person who had been concerned when she had drunk too much. The day she received some texts from him, including a couple telling her that she should come to his apartment and that he was waiting for her. He also began making calls to her phone. After a few ring-throughs with her agreements, I answered the phone myself and told him that she was married and that he should F off. He said that he was just calling to make sure she was okay, since she had been in a bad way the day before. I gave my wife the phone and she told him that she was okay and to stop calling. For the next week, I thought that was the end of things with him. On December 20th, we went with the kids to visit my in-laws for Christmas. On the 23rd, D-Day 2, my wife's parents went out to finish Christmas shopping. While they were out, I heard my wife talking to someone on the phone. My 3-year-old son, our 3-year-old, was in the room with her and she was having my son say hi to whoever she was speaking to. I asked her who it was, and she said she was talking to one of her friends from grad school. Something about the situation did not sit quite right with me. So, when she went to put our son to bed, I found her phone, and sure enough, the call had been to the AP. And there was a history of texts from the 13th to that evening, with some obvious gaps where messages had been deleted. The most recent conversation was about our kids, including some photos of our children, and ended with the AP stating how much he would like my wife to have his babies. I confronted her immediately, and she burst into tears and asked me to please not leave her. What has followed has been 2 months of lies and false promises to end things. She has told me that she wants to be reconciled and then gone right back to the affair. She pays verbal homage to go marital counseling, but only as a tactic to delay and to continue with. She has shocked me with the casualness with which she can lie to my face. She has continued her behavior up until this very evening as I write this. She is with him at his house right now. This week, I'm going to be talking to a lawyer and initiating a divorce. It's astounding how quickly and how thoughtlessly she has discarded our lives together. I'm ashamed to have spent so much of my life with her. If it weren't for our kids, who I love with all my heart, I would count all 15 years with her as an utter waste. OP, I'm so sorry. You're in the middle of all this right now. Please keep in mind one thing. You can be a super dad with or without your wife. You continue to be there for your kids, and your connection will grow stronger. As for the AP and your wife, let them live their fake fantasy. You are better than them both combined. The insincerity of their relationship will come to haunt them. She will come back, but you will be gone, living and being a great dad. Good luck. Now, let's get into today's second story. I've been married to my wife for a little over a year now. We've been together for almost 13 years. We have 2 children, ages 2 and 6, and we have a problem. My wife always seemed to be a happy woman, the life of the party, and a social beast. But she changed in the past few years. Her first pregnancy was really tough on her, and while giving birth to her oldest daughter, she developed a trauma. She got into therapy again and slowly rebuilt her positive flow, or so I thought. During these times, I noticed that she stopped talking to me about her negative thoughts if I admitted how much she hurt me with them. We had a second girl, and this time she did feel it, for about 3 or 4 months. Then the shame hit her that she hadn't felt this with our oldest girl. And in secret, she started having dark thoughts again. It turned out that her thoughts of suicide went from unwanted to welcome. We got married at the end of 2016, and it turns out that her feelings during that period were darker than ever. Before our marriage, she had met a man, a tattoo artist who was 15 years older and was working on her tattoo. Something to remember her dark period and her strength, and was married himself. They started an affair 2 weeks after our marriage and met in secret until I caught her this January. While digging through her lies, as she didn't want to tell me the whole truth, I found out that she had been in contact with 3 other men. She had sexed with 2, but only had deep and meaningful conversations with the last one. The weeks after that, she confessed to me that she had been very suicidal and that her meetings with that man felt like she could escape her reality and live in a bubble for a few hours. Nobody but me knew of her dark thoughts, and she had hidden her darkest drives even from me. We had a ton of arguments, but she told me she didn't want to lose me and that she loved me, that she made a mistake, and that she was afraid that she was broken beyond repair. She had been seeing a therapist because she was suffering from burnout, but she had only told her 10% of the truth. When I demanded she tell the therapist everything, they told her that the case was too hard for her kind of therapy. At the time, the verdict was still a postnatal depression that devolved into PTSD. A few weeks ago, she started with another clinic, and they quickly stated that the verdict was wrong. PTSD didn't fit because she didn't have trauma and because her thoughts were welcome and not intrusive. She felt at peace when browsing online for ways to kill herself or deciding what music should be played at her funeral. Currently, the verdict is dysthymic depression, and she'll be starting treatment soon. But now for the hard part. We spent 1.5 months trying to get past the fact that she had an affair, and I was slowly giving it a place that didn't cause pain all the time. The betrayal was painful, especially because she was always the one who crucified people who did this, and who started accusing me of having an affair the past year. I slowly got into a spot where I could manage, but 2 weeks ago, I confronted her with the fact that she had only shown remorse 2 times. That I felt as if I was fighting harder for this than her. That I felt as if I was the only one who had cheated and who was suffering, while she was being angry and defensive 24/7. She told me she felt it and that she would try. But 30 minutes later, she called me upstairs and told me it was over. That she loved me and the kids, but that her feelings were dead. Her trust was gone. I know the stress of being caught and having to hear that she has dysthymic depression is causing her to block her emotions, to go on the offense instead of admitting to what she did. But it feels as if she's making a decision while being in her darkest place, as remote from her true feelings as possible. She has agreed to go to couples counseling. We have our first session tomorrow, but I'm really looking for advice on how to handle her depression. And she has already stated that she wants it to work out with all her heart, but currently has no faith that it will help. She's dead inside. When talking to other people, she wants to let the whole world know what she did to crucify herself. She keeps stating that there are two sides to the story. And it's no excuse, but I felt so alone, thereby forgetting that I was just as alone as her in the relationship. And when I talk to other people about what happened, I'm mostly focusing on my mistakes, not hers. It feels as if she blames me for what she did, for what she became. I'm not the kind of person who likes to be on the wrong end of the stick, but I've quickly found out these past weeks that if I confront her or show too much anger, she withdraws and pushes me away or gets angry. I know she's not without feelings. During the time we spent apart would be crying, taking long walks, and mentally unstable. She presents herself for what she did to me and her children for the pain she caused us and hates what she's become. So how on earth do I handle her depression and adultery? Show her that I love her and that I care, without being a burden or giving her the feeling that I'm pushing her. We've been living apart these past 2 weeks, and she keeps telling me that she does love me, but that the spark is gone. But she wants it to return. But in the meantime, she can't be around me. How do I cope with her aggression and defensiveness without losing myself? How do I show her that I'm not the man that I became? How do I make her understand that the burden of not being good enough, or my wife wouldn't have preferred death, was slowly eroding me? Update. So we had our first couples therapy a few hours ago, and it was an eye-opener. Yes, she is depressed and has severe issues. And no, that does not excuse her behavior. She told the two therapists and me bluntly that she lied to me when she had sex with me the past few weeks. She told me repeatedly that she would never be intimate against her will. But during that session, she told us that she felt obliged to do it because of her mistake. Hearing that she lied about something as primal as this, even though I asked her and never forced her, angered me tremendously. Yes, she feels shame, but not guilt. It's all focused on her own pain and sorrow. And the fact that everyone who knows about this judges her, the other parents at school, her parents, mine, and our friends. The shame triggers her depression, and in turn, that triggers her anger. She's just spouting her own rationale for having an affair, a story that she's practiced for over a year in her own mind, and usually in an angry state of mind. And that's something that should and will stop. During the session, she was confronted several times by the therapists on why she was so angry, on why her pain and regret focused on the literally small things that were wrong in our marriage, instead of the things she did wrong in the same marriage. I'll wait until the next session before confronting her with anger at her total lack of respect for me and our kids, because I reckon that things like that can be best discussed with a therapist in the room and not one-on-one. If I confront her myself, I'll only cause her to dig herself in and lock the doors. If there's a neutral party present, she won't have that chance. Yes, I still think there's a chance that we can save this. And that's still what I want. But there has to be respect from both sides. I'm not someone to pick a fight with the mother of my children, the woman I still love, but she has to understand that if she walks, it's the end. She does not get to decide if we remain friends. She does not get to decide if and how I heal myself. If she walks out of this, she loses me. I'll remain civil for the kids, take care of the finances, and scrub her out of my life. There will be no bond between us, and I'll use every part of my energy to rebuild my life and be there for the kids. She doesn't get to decide if she'll be a factor in it. Ida. Opie, I'm really sorry about what you're going through. For the past 6 years, you've exhausted yourself trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed and isn't responding to your efforts at all. You are bearing all the emotional weight of your relationship. I know that she has depression and clearly has some deep mental health issues. But depression doesn't cause someone to treat their partner badly or cheat on them. Every single act of disrespect and unkindness is a choice that she makes. If staying is what you want, at least take care and look after yourself more. Get in tune with how much this whole thing is affecting you and be a better version of yourself. So, if she finally decided to move on regardless, you would know you've tried your very best. I wish you all the best with your situation, Opie. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on today's stories.